December 26, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. While most American families were unwrapping gifts and savoring the last moments of Christmas, inside one affluent home on 15th Street, a nightmare was unfolding that would capture the nation's attention for decades. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey dialed 911. Her voice, frantic and breaking, reported that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was missing. A ransom note had been found on the back staircase. But this wasn't going to be a typical kidnapping case. Nothing about what happened in the Ramsey home that Christmas night would ever be typical. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, a case that divided a nation, destroyed a family, and remains, to this day, one of America's most haunting unsolved murders. Act 1. The Perfect Family. To understand this case, we need to understand the Ramseys. John Ramsey was a self-made millionaire, the president of Access Graphics, a computer services company worth over $1 billion. Patsy Ramsey, a former Miss West Virginia, had traded pageant stages for motherhood, but she never lost her love for the spotlight. They lived in Boulder, an idyllic college town nestled against the Rocky Mountains. Their 15-room Tudor-style home on a quiet cul-de-sac was worth $700,000, a fortress of American success. They had 2 children, Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenét, who had just turned 6 in August. JonBenét, named after her father JonBenét Ramsey, was already a veteran of the child beauty pageant circuit. Little Miss Colorado, National Tiny Miss Beauty, America's Royale Miss. She'd won them all. Her blonde hair teased into curls, her tiny face painted with makeup, performing routines with the polish of someone 3 times her age. Christmas, 1996, was supposed to be magical. The Ramseys had attended a party at a friend's home on Christmas night. By all accounts, it was a normal evening. They returned home around 9:30 p.m. John carried a sleeping JonBenét upstairs and put her to bed, still wearing the outfit she'd worn to the party. Patsy claims she checked on both children before going to bed herself around 10 p.m. Sometime during the night, in that massive house with its maze of rooms and hallways, something went terribly, irreversibly wrong. Act 2. The 911 call. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey walked down the back staircase of her home. There, spread across 3 steps, she found a 2.5-page handwritten ransom note. The note was bizarre, theatrical, and would become one of the most analyzed documents in criminal history. "Mr. Ramsey," it began, "listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession." The note demanded $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus. It warned that JonBenét was being held by a group of individuals, yet it was signed by a single entity, SBTC. The kidnappers threatened to kill JonBenét if the police were called or if John didn't follow instructions precisely. Patsy called 911 immediately. The call lasted 5 minutes and 21 seconds. You can hear the terror in her voice. "We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please." Within 7 minutes, the first officers arrived. Officer Rick French was first through the door at 5:59 a.m. He did a quick search of the house, even checking the basement, but found no signs of forced entry and no JonBenét. The house appeared secure. All doors were locked. All windows were closed and latched, except for one broken window in the basement, but the undisturbed spiderweb across it suggested it hadn't been used recently. Here's where things get strange. Despite the ransom note's explicit warning not to contact anyone, the Ramseys immediately called friends. Within hours, the house was filled with people. Friends, victim advocates, the minister from their church. It was a crime scene turning into a social gathering, with evidence potentially being contaminated by the minute. The ransom note said the kidnappers would call between 8 and 10 a.m. John Ramsey sat by the phone. 8 a.m. passed. 9 a.m. passed. 10 a.m. came and went. The call never came. No kidnapper ever made contact. By 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt, who was now the primary officer on scene, suggested that John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White search the house again, top to bottom, for anything unusual. What happened next would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Act 3. The Discovery. At approximately 1:05 p.m., John Ramsey opened the door to a small basement room. A wine cellar that Officer French had checked that morning but found locked. John Ramsey said he immediately saw a white blanket on the floor. Underneath was JonBenét. John Ramsey let out a scream. He ripped the duct tape off his daughter's mouth, picked up her body, and carried her upstairs, contaminating what should have been the most crucial crime scene. Detective Arndt, alone with multiple people in the house and now with a dead child instead of a kidnapping victim, told John to put JonBenét down on the floor near the Christmas tree. JonBenét was wearing a white shirt and long underwear. A cord was tied around her right wrist and around her neck in a garrote, a sophisticated strangulation device made from a broken paintbrush handle. The other end of the wrist cord was tied loosely, almost staged. Her mouth had been covered with duct tape. Her skull had been fractured. The medical examiner would later determine that JonBenét had suffered a massive blow to the head, so severe it cracked her skull nearly in half. She'd also been strangled with the garrote. But which came first, the blow or the strangulation? This question would fuel decades of debate. The autopsy revealed more disturbing details. There was evidence of chronic sexual abuse, though this finding would be disputed by other experts. Her stomach contained pineapple, even though the Ramseys insisted she'd been asleep and hadn't eaten after returning home. A bowl of pineapple with a spoon was found on the kitchen table. Both Patsy and Burke's fingerprints were on the bowl. JonBenét's were not. Time of death was estimated between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. She'd been dead for hours when her father found her, lying just feet below where the family and their friends had been gathering all morning. The kidnapping was a fiction. This was a murder, and it had happened inside the house. Act 4. The Ransom Note. Let's talk about that ransom note because it's one of the most bizarre pieces of evidence in criminal history. At 2.5 pages, it's unusually long for a ransom note. Most are brief, just demands and threats. This one was different. It was theatrical, almost like something from a movie. Listen carefully. Don't try to grow a brain. The delivery will be exhausting. The language was oddly dramatic. Experts noted phrases that seemed lifted from action movies, particularly Dirty Harry, Speed, and Ransom, which had been released just months earlier. Then there's the amount, $118,000, not a round number, not an impressive sum for a millionaire, but exactly the amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus. How would an intruder know this specific detail? The note was written on a pad of paper from inside the Ramsey home, using a pen from inside the home. A practice note, a false start, was found on pages earlier in the same pad. Think about that. Someone sat in that house, possibly while the family slept, and wrote a 2.5-page ransom note, making at least one mistake and starting over. Handwriting experts were brought in. 4 of them could not conclusively exclude Patsy Ramsey as the author. The handwriting showed similarities to hers, but none would testify definitively that she wrote it. One expert believed John Ramsey wrote it, but most dismissed his analysis. And what about SBTC? Theories ranged from Saved by the Cross to references to military or foreign factions. To this day, no one knows what it means, or if it means anything at all. The note accomplished something, though. It kept the police from treating the home as a crime scene for crucial hours. It created the fiction of an intruder, and it bought someone time. Act 5. The Suspects. From the beginning, the Boulder police focused on the Ramseys themselves. The FBI's child abduction and serial murder unit profiled the case and believed JonBenét's death was not the result of a kidnapping, but rather a homicide that someone tried to stage as a kidnapping. The theory? One of the family members killed JonBenét, either accidentally or intentionally, and the others helped cover it up. But who? Patsy Ramsey became suspect number 1 for many investigators. The handwriting matched hers most closely. She'd been a beauty queen herself and had pushed JonBenét into pageants. Some theorized she'd lost her temper over bedwetting. JonBenét was wearing oversized underwear, possibly because hers were soiled. Had Patsy snapped in a moment of rage? The garrote, experts noted, was created from Patsy's own paintbrush, one that matched others in her hobby kit. John Ramsey was also scrutinized. Why had he been the one to find the body? Why had he immediately contaminated the crime scene? Some investigators felt his behavior was off, too controlled, too detached. But no evidence directly implicated him, and his grief seemed genuine to those who knew him well. Then there was Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old. He'd been interviewed briefly the day of the murder and seemed oddly detached, even smiling at inappropriate moments. A grand jury later heard evidence suggesting Burke might have struck JonBenét with a flashlight, found wiped clean on the kitchen counter, possibly in a fight over pineapple. The theory suggested Patsy or John then staged the scene to protect their son. Burke wouldn't speak publicly about the case for 20 years. When he finally did, in 2016, his awkward demeanor and inappropriate smiling reignited speculation, though he vehemently denied any involvement. But here's what complicated everything. DNA. Unidentified male DNA was found in JonBenét's underwear and mixed with her blood. It didn't match any Ramsey. In 2008, this DNA evidence led the district attorney to officially clear the Ramsey family, issuing a public apology. So if not the family, then who? Was there really an intruder? Investigators looked at several outsiders. There was a man who'd played Santa Claus at the Ramseys' Christmas party. He'd given JonBenét a card and told her he had a special present for her. He died in 2002, but his DNA didn't match. There were local sex offenders. There were hundreds of confessions from people around the world, including John Mark Carr in 2006, whose confession made global headlines until his DNA proved he was lying. The problem with the intruder theory? No forced entry, no footprints in the snow outside, though this is sometimes overstated. There were walkways. No evidence that someone had been hiding in the house for hours. The intruder would have had to know the house layout, know about John's bonus, have time to write a ransom note, commit murder, and escape without leaving significant evidence. Two theories, both with problems. A family with no history of violence, or a ghost-like intruder who left almost no trace. The truth seemed unreachable. Act 6. The Aftermath. The JonBenét Ramsey case became a media sensation unlike anything America had seen since the O.J. Simpson trial. Her pageant photos were everywhere. This beautiful child in makeup and costumes, frozen in time, plastered across tabloids and television screens. The coverage was relentless, often cruel. Patsy Ramsey was tried in the court of public opinion long before any legal proceedings. The Boulder police and the district attorney's office publicly feuded over the direction of the investigation. It became less about finding justice and more about winning a PR battle. In 1999, a grand jury heard months of testimony. What few people knew until 2013 was that the grand jury actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder, but for child abuse resulting in death and being accessories to a crime. But the district attorney refused to sign the indictment, saying there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. Patsy Ramsey died in 2006 from ovarian cancer, maintaining her innocence until the end. She never saw her daughter's killer brought to justice. John Ramsey remarried and has spent the years since trying to clear his family's name and push for new DNA testing. Burke Ramsey, now an adult, successfully sued CBS for $750 million after a documentary suggested he killed his sister. The case was settled for an undisclosed amount. He lives a private life, forever marked by a tragedy he insists he had no part in. The Boulder Police Department officially designated the case as cold, but they've never closed it. Every few years there's a new lead, a new theory, new DNA technology that might finally crack the case. In recent years, genetic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer, has given investigators new hope. There's still DNA from an unknown male at the crime scene. If that DNA is in the right databases, if the right connections can be made, there might still be answers. But for now, JonBenét Ramsey remains frozen at 6 years old in our collective memory. A little girl who loved performing, who was robbed of the chance to grow up, whose death revealed the darkest possibilities that can lurk behind closed doors in even the most perfect-seeming families. Was it someone who loved her? Someone who envied the family? A stranger who slipped in and out like a ghost? Or was the truth something more complicated than any single theory can capture? 28 years later, we still don't know. And that might be the most haunting part of all. Closing. If you followed this case as it unfolded, or you're just hearing about it now, one thing is clear. Everyone failed JonBenét. The police fumbled the initial investigation. The media turned her death into entertainment. The legal system couldn't bring anyone to justice. And someone, whether family or stranger, took everything from a 6-year-old girl who never got to live a full life. The Boulder police still accept tips. If you have any information about this case, please contact them. Cases have been solved decades later. It's never too late for the truth. Until that day comes, JonBenét Ramsey remains one of America's most enduring mysteries. A little beauty queen whose story ended in tragedy, and whose voice was silenced before she could tell us what really happened that Christmas night. If you found this investigation compelling, there are many more cases that still deserve this level of attention. This channel is dedicated to careful, respectful deep dives into stories that remain unanswered. We focus on the evidence, the facts, and the truth, without sensationalism. If that's the kind of content you value, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case. And let us know in the comments which case you think we should cover next. Thank you for spending this time with us. A like or share helps these stories reach others who care. Because the truth matters, justice matters, and every victim deserves to be remembered.